Hello, everyone. Namaste, and thank you for being here with me. And we're going to be talking about self-compassion, learning to be good friends with ourselves. And this was originally done as a presentation to a small group of people at the library, but I thought that this material might help a lot of people go through some tough times if I make it into a video webinar of sorts. And let me go to the next slide. So I originally learned about self-compassion and this material through Kristen Neff's retreat through Spirit Rock. So everything that I am presenting here is based on her presentations and her material. I don't claim intellectual rights to it. I am just a learner who has benefited from her research. And I am just here to share with you what has worked for me in those dark nights of the soul, in those shadow times, shadow hours where it just felt like it's like 3 o'clock in the morning, no one is around you, you don't want to wake up your family members, but you have nowhere to go. And this material has helped me go through those hours, and I'm hoping that it helps you as well. For more information on her work, I think you can Google Kristen Neff. She has her website, and of course, she's a published author, and you can find her information almost anywhere. So let's go. So firstly, let's go over why self-compassion. This is a really interesting question because it allows us to start thinking about what self-compassion really is. And there's a short exercise coming up. So if you want to grab a piece of paper or if you want to get your laptop and open up Notepad or a writing processor, that should be helpful. So exercise 1, how do I typically respond to a good friend in distress? Let's start there. When a good friend of mine or a family member is in distress, how do I typically respond, or how do you typically respond? So is it okay? Do we say to that person, you know, life is just a journey and not a destination? Do we try to soothe that person? And in your mind, notice your tone, notice your gesture, your posture, your feelings. Notice what emotions come up for you when you are soothing your friend, or it may not be soothing, it's just how you would respond to a good friend in distress. So think about that for a little bit. And of course, if you need the time, feel free to pause the video and take your time, think about it, think it through, really make that scenario alive in your head. Okay, so number 2, how do I typically respond to myself in distress? Now it gets interesting, right? Let's say I failed an exam, or somehow I got reprimanded at work, or a client complained about me, or my kids were being hard on me, you know, la da da, etc., etc. So how do I typically respond to myself in distress? What is the self-talk that goes on? Do I say I'm stupid? No one else has this problem. Just get it over with. Also notice the tone, the gesture, the posture, the feelings as we deal with our personal distress. And now number 3, what are the patterns of difference between how you respond to your good friend versus yourself? And do you see the difference between how you respond to your good friend versus yourself? Are you a little more detached, situational with your friends and family, but do you get personal and blame yourself when it's just you? Or are you more patient with your friends? And do you catastrophize a little more with yourself? I mean, there are exceptions, but I find that with myself, a lot of the times I am much more lenient with friends in distress. I'm much more lenient and much more loving and much more encouraging when others are needing help or needing that support, emotional support, needing to be talked up, needing to be pep talked, versus if it's just myself, I tend to be many, many times harder when it is just myself. So get a feel for where you stand in all of it. It doesn't have to be either way, and you could come out to be neutral, or you may actually find yourself to be pretty encouraging towards yourself, and that's all good. Okay. So now let's go over the mechanics of self-compassion. So why are we more self-critical of ourselves versus others? Most likely. And it turns out there's an evolutionary reason for self-criticism. And this has to do with threat response and how we're naturally wired for threat response. So externally, when we talk about threat response, we're all very familiar with what our systems tend to do. It's fight, flight, and freeze. But when that threat is internal, when that threat is based on a belief or based on a thought, it's not really the external threat, such as, a lion coming in to eat you as a zebra. That response turns inward into self-criticism, into isolation, and into rumination. And so either of those, either it's external pain or internal pain, can feel really threatening. And that can turn on the survival stress response in the body. So especially when we stuff things down, we're just, in order to survive in the modern world, to get on with the pace, in order to go, lead our busy lives, sometimes we stuff things down, a lot of times actually, and we think that, oh, these are just emotions. I can just wave them away. I could just suppress them away and they're not going to come back and bite me. But it turns out the body sees it as just another threat, even though it may be more of an emotional threat. So that becomes self-criticism, isolation, and rumination. And so conversely, why are we more compassionate towards others? And this has to do with our evolutionary response for caregiving. And it's sort of a no-brainer. We're mammals and we have to take care of our young. And our youngs have to express, or when they're hurt, when they're in pain, they need to trigger our threat response system in order to get our attention and get care. So that makes sense. The pain of those who are close to us activates the care response. And that's very intuitive, especially with crying babies. We just have that direct response towards baby in distress. We want to soothe the baby. We want to make sure that the baby is taken care of, and hence ensuring the survival of the species. That's all very intuitive. So then why do some people have more self-compassion than others? And there are a multiple of reasons. It could be because there are conflicts at home that prevent someone from accessing self-compassion, or it could be parental criticism, sort of a negative or toxic family environment growing up, which could be about insecure attachment. Either it's anxious or avoidant or disorganized insecure attachment. Or it could be a history of abuse. Either it's in the small t, as in your mom said something to you, and afterwards you started to not access the self-compassion as much, or the big trauma, the bigger traumas, as in the bigger abuses. Or it could be, geopolitical environment, milieu, where it's cultural to not have as much self-compassion, or that there are constant wars going on where survival is absolute paramount before we have the time and the emotional resource, the energetic resource to access compassion for ourselves. So it could be a multiple of reasons why for some it's harder to access self-compassion versus others who may access it more easily. And the good news is that self-compassion can be learned. So let's define self-compassion, and this is according to Dr. Neff's 3 components of self-compassion. Again, this is not my grab, this is not my research work or conclusion. This is from Dr. Kristen Neff. So the 3 components are kindness, common humanity, and mindfulness. And we're going to break down these 3 components as we go. So firstly, mindfulness. This word has been thrown around a lot, so let's define it a little bit. So in this context, mindfulness allows us to be with painful feelings as they are without the need to change. And to me, that's really the key and the central meaning of mindfulness in this context, is to have the awareness to see the pain, to be with the pain, and to feel it through without the need to change. So that means we're avoiding extremes of suppressing or running away from painful feelings, the fight, flight, freeze that we were talking about, but we're doing it with painful feelings. So mindfulness is being able to come back to this moment and to feel through the feelings, to just be with the feelings. But we're also not blowing up the feelings disproportionately. We're being with the feelings as is. We're not pushing away, nor are we grasping, being attached amplifying, magnifying the meaning or the feelings. So we're being with it as is through mindfulness. And of course, with mindfulness, again, it's being thrown around a lot and it's being taught almost everywhere now. So there are all sorts of tools for us to practice mindfulness. It just depends on which tool resonates with you. And, you can just research mindfulness tools, mindfulness techniques online. The main point being is to just be able to practice mindfulness to a point where we could have that sort of a gap with the feelings, but still be with the feelings in this moment without need to change. Okay. I'm gonna grab some water here. So the second component to self-compassion is common humanity. And I really love this one, and it really works for me personally. So this is about being able to see our own experience as a part of a larger human experience. And it reduces a sense of isolation. We're then reminded that this is whatever that we're experiencing, whatever emotions that we're going through, whatever threat response that we're going through, someone, most likely almost everyone, have gone through the same experience with you. And I feel like, of course, I'm projecting, but I feel like I can say this almost literally, that everyone has gone through this experience and that we are not that much different in our neural wirings, unless you have a medical, sort of like I don't want to say special case, like something like physiologically that sets you apart. Otherwise, chances are someone has definitely experienced what you've experienced. And likely there are people who are experiencing the exact same thing right now. And not just one and two, but in droves, in large numbers. Because that simply is the human experience, and we forget that sometimes. And it's also about common humanity, is also about recognizing that life is not perfect, which with my personality, personally, this is something that I've had to remind myself over and over again and practice to accept that the human experience means that we run a gamut or a spectrum of emotions and experiences. That just because I'm experiencing pain, suffering, feelings, or I'm experiencing distress, doesn't mean that there is something wrong with me. When we hear about this, it's a no-brainer, isn't it? And it's so easy for us to talk in this way with our friends. But when it comes back to us and how we face ourselves and how we manage our own distress, it becomes not so apparent. But it makes sense, doesn't it? That life really is about a spectrum, a rainbow of experiences and emotions, and the pain, the suffering. And sometimes we go to the sort of what we, in New Age, we call the lower vibrations, right? Especially with David R. Hawkins's, he has a list of emotions that are ranked in terms of vibration or frequency. And I think, I forgot, but it's at the lower rung, of course, you have the hatred, you have the apathy, you know, you have the lack of self-esteem, or, all of those negative emotions. And so in New Age, what I found is that then we try to shun those experiences and try to reach for the emotions that are exalted, like love, empathy, connection. And I'm forgetting that list, but check it out. It's by David R. Hawkins. But when we try to push away artificially those negative experiences, and we criticize ourselves for not being perfect enough, and that's why we are experiencing the lower frequencies, the experiences that are not so positive, we end up staying on those lower frequencies. So this practice is about just recognizing that the human experience really is about that undulation a lot of the times. And I have to say, for me, it's just my real life experience that the human experience is those undulations, and to not take it personally, and to know that just because they're undulations doesn't mean that your life is not perfect, because life really is about experiencing the ups and downs and experiencing through the sufferings. And also, sufferings are not all the same, but all are worthy of compassion. So sometimes we compare our distress and sufferings. How dare I complain about my kids nagging and my kids not doing well in school versus, someone in the third world country or someone in the warring countries worrying about food and resources and water. How dare I, suffer in these first world or developed worlds issues that are really not issues. But in self-compassion, we recognize that we have to play at our own edge. We play at our own edge, and there is no comparison. We are all worthy of compassion and self-compassion. Okay, that's common humanity. And then self-kindness. Treating yourself with care and understanding rather than being harsh, being judgmental. And this is also about a desire to alleviate suffering, our own and others. So I feel like self-kindness is really self-explanatory. It's to just being able to practice being nicer to ourselves. And knowing that when voices of judgments come up, they're just voices, and we have the choice, we have the agency to go another route, to go another direction with how we want to respond to our distress. And there's a really interesting distinction here between self-love and self-compassion. So self-love is the appreciation of one's own goodness and uniqueness. And self-compassion actually brings in the larger community. What we talked about in the last slide, the common humanity. With self-compassion, it's sort of like on top of self-love, we have that appreciation of our humanity as a part of the whole, that we are one drop in the ocean, and yet we are sharing the experiences of the ocean. And that's really powerful. All right, and here's another really great distinction, and it clarifies a lot what self-compassion is. So self-esteem versus self-compassion. Self-esteem, it drives self-worth from social comparisons. It's dependent on external validation, and it can lead to narcissism. It doesn't have to, but in the extreme, it's narcissism. It's self-importance. It's the lack of empathy, as we see in the political world sometimes, where they value self-esteem, but without the added component of self-compassion. So self-compassion, it derives self-worth from commonality and connectedness. So it's not contingent on comparison. It doesn't rely on your neighbor doing worse than you for you to feel good about yourself. So it's more stable. And there's no association with narcissism. And of course, this is from research done by Kristen Neff and her staff. I'm not sure where the science comes from or the study comes from, but again, I'm just sharing what I've heard from Dr. Neff. But it makes sense, doesn't it? When the self-worth is derived from having connection with others, we don't need to focus on ourselves as much. We don't need to focus on our individual sufferings, or we don't put our individual sufferings against somebody else's sufferings. We're actually being more collective-minded, and we're able to experience a sense of connectedness by being collective-minded. Okay. So here's another distinction between tender and fierce self-compassion. And this illustration here, again, is from Dr. Neff's presentation. I believe it was given to her by a student or someone who was also a fan. So, I don't claim authorship. It's her graphics. I'm just sharing it because it's really helpful as a visual to see the difference. So tender self-compassion is the nurturing aspect of self-compassion. It's about being with ourselves in a compassionate way. It allows us to heal. It's about, the hugs, the TLC. It's about accepting ourselves, feeling like we're just being accepted by Mother Nature, by God, whatever you believe. It feels tender. It feels heartful. And versus fierce self-compassion, it's more of a powerful dimension of self-compassion, and it comes with action. It's about protecting, providing, motivating, and sometimes about fending off threats. It's about taking action, sometimes fierce action, to alleviate the suffering. So it's sort of the angrier mama bear stance, protecting the baby bear. So self-compassion isn't all just TLC and gooey and soft and seemingly without a backbone. No, it allows us to take action when action is needed in order to alleviate suffering. You know, both are needed and they have different functions. So let's talk about self-compassion and well-being. So with self-compassion, typically there's a reduction in depression, stress, shame, anxiety, disordered eating, PTSD, and, ideation. And there's also a reduction in sympathetic response and reduces physical symptoms that it could just be simple aches and colds to the more chronic symptoms that can come up when we are in distress, when we're in prolonged distress, that is. And with self-compassion, there typically is an increase in life satisfaction, happiness, optimism, body appreciation, hope, gratitude, and a sense of being able to thrive. And it ups our immune system, our immune response when we're under social stress, social pressure. And it gives us better sleep quality, as I mentioned. I actually forgot if I did, but this material really helped me when I couldn't sleep at night. I would wake up at 3 in the morning feeling distressed, and I still do sometimes. Feeling super down on myself, feeling like I failed in my life and this, and that, coming from sort of a perfectionistic mindset, feeling really self-critical and not being able to go back to sleep, doing self-compassion very actively, practicing self-compassion very actively allowed me to go back to sleep in peace. It allowed me to come back to sort of an emotional equilibrium. We're not asking for ecstasy. We're not asking for something that is so in the extreme that we get too excited, but we're talking about coming back to a neutral equanimity within our own emotional balance and system and physical system and physiological terms, actually. And so self-compassion absolutely contributes to better sleep, or actually the ability to go back to sleep. All right. So a couple of common myths to self-compassion, and I just find these really interesting. We've talked about this with the fear of self-compassion. With number one, the myth is that self-compassion is weak. It's frou-frou. It's too soft. Can't stand against all the stresses in the world. But it turns out we get more strength and resilience in challenging situations with self-compassion. And studies have shown that soldiers have less PTSD when they practice self-compassion. And myth number two, self-compassion is selfish. When you put a self in front of anything, you could argue that it's selfish. And again, research show that the more self-compassion we're able to have for ourselves, the more resources we have to give. So it's actually less focused on the self and more about being able to give towards relationship, or having enough resources within ourselves to be able to reciprocate properly in an open, functioning, healthy relationship. And then myth number three, self-compassion is self-indulgent. But actually, when we apply more mindfulness towards ourselves, we are more aware of wanting healthier behaviors. We're more aware of our personal needs. Could be in terms of diet, exercise, health, or the work-life balance we need, or the type of relationships and connections that we need for us to better function. And again, have that padding, have a healthy margin of resources so that we don't go straight into distress, or we don't go straight into stress response, threat response the next time something triggers. And then myth number 4, self-compassion undermines motivation. But actually, self-compassion reduces fear of failure, hence increasing motivation and persistence. And what this is referring to is, that slide about self-confidence versus self-compassion. So with self-confidence, because we are in the me and thou situation, as in it's still the self-esteem is derived from a sense of comparison. I need you to do worse than me, or I need myself to do better than others in order for me to feel self-acceptance, in order for me to feel okay. And with that, there's going to be a fear of failure. But with self-compassion, where we are actually functioning as one collective, I'm not saying we're all the same, but that we are linked by collective humanity, there's a sense that then I don't need to fear failure. I don't need to fear whatever images, whatever negative self-talk that gets triggered when we think about moving towards that next step that leads us to what we want, or making that change, making that healthier change. We no longer fear failure. And that means there's an increase in our ability to move forward, because we realize everybody goes through this. It's the same as babies learning to crawl, and babies learning to walk, and needing to fall a couple of times in order for babies to walk. I mean, we all go through the same thing. So that's self-compassion and motivation. So now let's come back to another practice, so we get a visceral sense of how self-compassion can really help us. And first, let's work on the supportive touch. So self-compassion through touch. So the point is to find the gesture, to find sort of the physical response where you would be sensitive to touch in sort of a soothing way. So we're trying to deactivate the sympathetic response, and we want to tap into the care system, whatever gesture that feels like you're being secured in your mother's arms or your caretaker's arms, whatever that makes you feel connected to a sense of care, love, tenderness. Try it out. It could be hands on heart, could be on the face, could be laying on the stomach, or it could be, if you need just outright embrace, go for it. And sometimes, it could be just some sort of a gesture along with rocking. For me, Personally, it's about hands on heart, but sort of tapping. I have this extra tapping motion on the sternum that creates this resonance on my sternum that feels really soothing to me, as in I'm trying to regulate my heart energy and telling my heart chakra, my heart energy, that it's all okay. So for me, it's hands on heart with the light tap. So we respond differently. Choose one that works. So again, feel free to pause the video if you need more time to explore, and there's no judgment. If it involves you needing to be in sort of a meditative position, or you need to cross your legs, or you need to do something with your body to feel it, do so. It doesn't have to be simple, it doesn't have to be complicated. It's what resonates with you, what makes you feel supported. Okay, and now continuing on with exercise number 2. This could be just something that you do along with me, or you can make it a journaling exercise. So let's practice self-compassion through language and touch, using mindfulness, common humanity, and kindness. So we're bringing the 3 components together now. So right now, let's go ahead and relax a little bit. Just adjust your seating position, or if you're lying down, whatever it is that you need to do to feel supported. So right now, call to mind what's been mildly distressing. It can be a challenging situation, but not overwhelming. So you can also close your eyes, but if you do have your eyes closed, I do have a graphic on the slides that's about the zones of learning. So at the center, at the core, we have a safe zone where we feel safe, we don't feel challenged, but we're also not learning anything. And then the next circle out, we have the challenge zone, where we would be challenged by the situation. But within that challenge, we're able to learn a lot, but it's not overwhelming. And then the next circle out is the overwhelm zone, where the content, the material, the distress is simply too much for us to handle in a conducive way, in a way where it is conducive to learning. And that's what we want to avoid this time. We just want to stay in between the safe zone and the overwhelm zone, in the challenge zone, where we feel like we're pushed to the edge a little bit, but it's not enough for the fight, flight, freeze response to overtake us completely. So have that distressing situation in mind. And now let's start with mindful awareness. Recall to mind what we were experiencing in that moment. Either it's distress, grief, anger, exhaustion, frustration, tiredness. Anything that comes up doesn't have to be what I listed. Just be aware of what comes up and just let it be. Just let it be and see it and say, I see you. I recognize this particular distress. And I see you. without needing to push it away, without needing to magnify the distress. We simply see that distress and our emotional response in that moment without pushing it away. And once we are connected to that moment, to our distress, it feels 3D. It feels like a complete recall. The recalling is complete. Let's move on to calm and humanity. So now remind yourself that you're not alone, that your experience is common, that your experience is a part of the human experience, that you are not suffering this alone, that of course it happens. Chances are it happens to a lot of people. It happens. So it's okay. It's okay. We're not alone in this. And then shifting to kindness, we speak the words of kindness towards ourselves with the supportive touch. So with me, again, it is hands on heart, lightly tapping, and then say, you know, it's okay that you're going through this distress. You know, for me, it's Zealand. It's okay that you're going through this distress. It is very, very common. Everybody goes through this. You deserve compassion. You deserve empathy. And that don't forget you're supported. Don't forget you're supported. So think of any words of kindness that you would offer your friend if they're in the same distressing situation, and turn it towards yourself. Of course, I'm assuming they're all positive, of course. Okay, and when you feel complete with this exercise, or if you're doing it as a writing, journaling exercise, feel free to pause and complete it. And once you feel a sense of completion, we will move on. So now let's shift gears into resistance. So Kristen Neff describes resistance as sort of a backdraft. And it happens because when we open the doors to spaces that have been shut very tight for a long time, the pain can suddenly flood out and feel overwhelming and disturbing. And it's actually a sign that you are doing the practice right. You know, this practice is not always about rainbows and unicorns and hearts and flowers. It's actually about being able to be with the feelings, be with the disturbance. And as we learn through the zones of learning graph, that overwhelm deters learning. So be sure to slow down if you feel overwhelmed. It's okay to just shut down or step away from the content, just to be kind to yourself and recognize the intention of wanting, a sense of wanting to make friends with this content. be gentle around it and thank yourself for having this intention in the first place. And you can also choose to switch over to behavioral self-compassion, which would be more about, the physical acts of soothing. So getting yourself a cup of tea, walks, time with pets, and then for her, I think grounding soles of the feet really worked for Dr. Neff. It didn't work as much with me for some reason, but I'm guessing that it works for a lot of people to just sort of be able to come back to the present moment and not have these flooding of distressing images come out in the forefront of your consciousness. Because when it comes out fast and furious, we can become identified with those images and make it into a movie. So sometimes backdraft is a challenge, and it can be a part of the natural process of healing. Again, it's okay. And here's a graphic of, why we use, or why Dr. Neff used backdraft as a sort of analogy to the resistance we're talking about. So the backdraft is the abrupt burning of superheated gases in a fire. It's caused when oxygen rapidly enters a hot oxygen depleted environment. So for example, when a window or door to an enclosed space is open or broken. So in a tightly sealed, this image is from a fire drill that I found online. So when you have a container that's been sealed tight without oxygen and you suddenly open it, there could be spontaneous ignition and explosion when oxygen is introduced. So same thing with with emotions that are really buried deep down. When we introduce the light of consciousness to those deep places, those shadow places, it could ignite very, very suddenly and cause us to go into emotional overdrive, distress. And just know that if the distress is too much, feel free to do, again, the behavioral, the physical self-compassion, as in do the teas, do the walks, before you actually go to the self-compassion exercise, with the mindfulness, common humanity, and kindness. Before you go there, that's when you do that, it's when you're in the challenge zone, that there is some sort of a gap between you and the emotions. That's when you can actually do the self-compassion exercise and reflection. But when it gets so strong, you want to start with something physical first. Either go for a walk to exhaust that physical energy, that intensity, or spend time with pets to really calm down, to be able to place yourself in a safer distance from the emotions. And if I use myself as an example, when I wake up and it's absolutely just me catastrophizing to no end, and I can't get to the self-compassion practice right away, I'm going to get up and walk around the room. I'm going to shake it out. And sometimes, I would watch cat videos to just calm myself down a little bit first, to calm down from the overwhelmed zone to the challenge zone before I actually get to the self-compassion exercise. And I think that's okay. All right, so in terms of resistance, we suffer a lot when we resist. So suffering is pain multiplied by resistance. resistance multiplies our pain when we try to, shove it away. That actually causes suffering. So don't use self-compassion as a form of resistance. We don't use self-compassion to try to make the pain go away. We don't reject any part of ourselves. If we do, what we resist persists. So let's watch this short video on resistance. It demonstrates resistance very well versus what happens when we just let go and accept the emotions. And you can go ahead and skip ahead if you want. If you want to just watch this with a better quality in YouTube, feel free. Just Google, search for The Fly and Samurai on YouTube, and you'll find this video. And again, this is from Dr. Kristen Neff's presentation. She uses material under the topic of resistance. And I think this was given to her by one of her students or something like that. Don't quote me on it. I don't remember, but it's just a great way of demonstrating resistance. So here we go. So yeah, very simply, what we resist persists. It's the video is just so self-explanatory, and it's also a very good, what am I trying to say here? So basically, it also shows how meditation can allow us to train for that mindfulness where we're able to simply be with the emotion instead of resist it. In this video, And it demonstrates also how when we resist, as we focus on the content in that resistance, we magnify the emotional potency. We magnify the severity. We magnify the negativity and the content of what's causing us annoyance and distress. So I know this is sort of off topic, but meditation really is a great way to just be here now. Okay. So use self-compassion to open to the present moment. Fierce self-compassion takes us into action to change the future for the better. And tender self-compassion helps us accept what is happening right now, like our pain in a situation of injustice. And the central paradox of self-compassion and the self-compassion practice is that we give ourselves self-compassion not to feel better, but because we feel bad in the moment. So basically, we want to feel without resistance. The practice is about being able to feel and accept the feelings without resistance. And then when it comes to fierce and tender, it's like, again, with my, 3 o'clock in the morning situation, what I found helpful for me was to do fierce self-compassion first, because when I'm in that negative state, there is no momentum to go towards what feels good. It's almost like I'm suction cupped already to a certain level of negativity bias. So I find that I've had to apply fierce self-compassion first and to say, Elin, I'm protecting you. Now get yourself up. Sort of I'm pushing myself to get up and walk a little bit, or get up and get some water, get the body moving first, sort of to apply some pressure to it first, so that I'm building some sort of momentum for me to be able to do the self-compassion exercise, to do the actual self-compassion work. And I heard Dr. Rick Hansen talk about this in one of his talks. He's a neuroscientist, and I think he studies compassion as well. I forgot what he studies, but he's a well-known author also. And he's mentioned this before, where sometimes it's in terms of meditation or in terms of something that we actually want to do that's good for us, but we don't have the momentum to do it. It's good to apply some kind of pressure first, like applying pressure to the ice when you're on the skates. If you just stand there, you're not going to move. But if you could just do a little kick and apply that pressure of the ice or of the knife onto the ice, then, once you get yourself moving, then the momentum can keep going. So I never forgot that imagery. It's so useful when I'm stuck. I just remember that, okay, there is inertia right now. I know I don't want to move. I don't want to move towards self-compassion. I don't want to move towards well-being. I'm stuck, but I know once I get moving, I will have that momentum, and I have enough experience to trust it. I just think of, skates on ice. I just have to apply that little bit of initial pressure. So for me, 3 o'clock in the morning, that means get up, even if it's to get on YouTube and watch stupid cat videos. Do it. Then that gets the ball rolling, the momentum going for me to get to a place where, okay, I'm ready to review my own slides and do the practice. I know it's I assure you it's absolutely not out of boastfulness, but there are times I'm just like, oh my God, I need my own slides on self-compassion. And then I go through the slides, remind myself that suffering is the part of life experience, and I don't need to suffer more than I need to. I can release the resistance, and I'm going to apply some fierce self-compassion right now and just watch some cat videos or get up and walk, get a cup of tea, and then move into the tender part of it, and then, start to do some kindness practice with myself. So for me, it kind of works like that, just as an example. Okay, now let's switch gears a little bit. Now it's about self-compassion and caring for others. This is a biggie uh, the healthcare in the healthcare field, where we hear of empathy fatigue, compassion fatigue a lot, and caring for others. So let's talk about that a little bit. And of course, even if we're not in the medical fields or in the healthcare profession, we all have to care for others in one way or another, as parents, caretakers to our parents, or caretakers to someone dear to us. We all go through the situation. So let's apply self-compassion in this case. So first of all, how is self-compassion useful in caring for others? As I talked about, stressful situations can lead to empathy fatigue without self-compassion, as it turns out. So let's make that distinction between empathy and compassion first, because a lot of people use these two terms interchangeably, but they're actually really different. So when we're talking about empathy, I learned this through Dr. Neff as well, and just found it so useful to have that distinction. So empathy is actually a natural emotional resonance. It's a pre-verbal capacity of the human brain to mirror neurons and neural activity to create autonomic mimicry. So if I see my friends in distress, something within my physiology, my brain physiology, or my nervous system will start to mirror that distress, so that I become empathetic to that person's sufferings. And then I automatically notice that, whoa, that person is actually suffering in the moment, even though they're smiling, they're talking, but there's something, something in the brain, maybe something uh, in the chemistry that allows us to pick up an emotional resonance. Isn't that interesting? So it really is autonomic mimicry. It's, for me, it just means it's automatic. We don't have to try. We're naturally able to tell, as we uh, um, receive the sense perceptions. What we see, either the other person's pupil dilating or some sort of change in their line of sight, or they're blushing, or that their breathing seems rushed. There are all sorts of these different different indicators that allow us to be in a literally physiological empathetic mode. Versus compassion is the concern with alleviating suffering with the buffer of mindfulness. The difference being that there is a buffer of mindfulness with compassion. And so in autonomic mimicry, which is about empathetic resonance, that automatic resonance we have with people, it can lead to secondary traumatic stress and burnout in caregivers, as in, we weren't actually the ones who were abused in childhood. And yet, because of autonomic mimicry and being in close proximity to the people who are in distress, we could soak up the distress secondhand. And hence, empathy fatigue, which again happens a lot to caregivers. So now let's get down even more to the difference between empathy and compassion. And this is a video of Matthieu Ricard, author, Buddhist monk, who explains the difference of empathy and compassion. Again, if you prefer to just watch on YouTube, search in YouTube the difference between empathy and compassion, and you will find this video, or I'm going to go ahead and play this video now.
So in the course of the scientific study on the effect of meditation, I also came to meet another neuroscientist called Tanya Singer. She's a German scientist, and she's one of the world's specialists of empathy. Empathy is the faculty to resonate with others' feeling. If someone comes with a big smile, oh, you start smiling. If someone suffers, you feel some of the suffering. And it turns out, if you study the brain, that empathy with suffering, for instance, if you really empathize with someone who is suffering, the area that registers suffering in the brain is activated in the same way, in the same area that the person who is suffering. So it is real suffering. What happens? If you are a caregiver, whether a nurse, a doctor, taking care of ailing patients, of your own elderly parents, if you constantly resonate with them, it's a challenge. It can be a kind of a burden. And if a nurse, for instance, the patient might cure or die, but he's not going to be usually sick for 20 years. But if for 20 years you have day after day to suffer with the patient, then understandably it's sometimes too much. It's called the burnout. Some people call compassion fatigue. Or some people, they say, oh, I have to warn myself. I cannot be so emotional, so I have to distance myself, which is not also very good, because a caregiver should be with the patient. So what is the solution? So we thought of that with Tanya Singer, and we tried to unpack the different elements of compassion. So I went myself in the scanner, and Tanya said, just try to resonate on the suffering without your compassion meditation. And I did that for 2 hours in the scanner, and within 2 hours I just completely burned out. I was imagining, I had seen a documentary on terrible situation in orphanages in Romania with kids who were so weak that even moving sometimes they'll break their bones. And I'd seen that the night before, so I was filled with that, and I really resonated, and 2 hours was unbearable. Normally when you do that in meditation, you bring compassion right away. So I was holding it. And then at the end she said, well, we could do the compassion meditation in the afternoon, or we could do it now. I said, please, let's do it now. I can't stand it anymore. So I felt like when I brought the compassion component, it was like opening of a dam. I feel that every atom of suffering now is soaked with the atom of loving kindness. Instead of feeling uncomfortable, not knowing how to handle that suffering, I feel like embracing. Completely different. And in the brain also, complete change. Many areas that has to do with empathy, distress, with fear, with pain, were gone. And you could see the perception of others suffering, but with a lot of wholesome feelings at the same time. So we got the idea together that there's no such thing as compassion fatigue, but only empathy fatigue. And that stand-alone empathy, just empathy, leads to burnout. But if you have empathy within the vaster sphere of loving kindness and compassion, then you have the whole buffer of this compassion that prevents all the negative effect of feeling the other suffering. And I think that's has tremendous potential, helping caregivers to train in arousing more of that loving kindness. And you see some nurses who are naturally very, very, motherly and affectionate, and usually they don't burn out because they have these resources of compassion, that pool of compassion. But that can be trained. And the other studies on meditation and neuroscience have shown that those qualities can be trained. So I think this is a wonderful way that possibly meditation could contribute something to society in collaboration with science.
Okay. So basically another marketing video for meditation, but I hope you caught that difference between empathy and compassion. And for me, the greatest distinction, again, it's being able to have that gap. There's a distance between the suffering that you see in somebody else versus you. And I'm not talking about detachment. I'm talking about, for some reason, and I don't understand why, when we are practicing compassion, that gap naturally happens, and we are more able to be in a place of power. We feel our power intact. We feel our own agency to be able to move into action that actually helps someone else. Okay. Oop. Let's move on. So in wanting to really distinguish between the two, I did some personal research to really get at the definition. So according to Psychology Today, empathy is the ability to recognize, understand, and share the thoughts and feelings of another. We mirror each other's physiology alongside the emotion. So it's autonomic mimicry. We just mirror very instinctually what the other person is feeling. And sometimes that aids communication, that aids connection. And evolutionarily, it's not hard to imagine that this allows the survival of the baby, right? And then compassion is concern for the suffering of others with the desire to help, with mindfulness. So in this definition, they're emphasizing mindfulness. And if you remember in one of our initial slides, mindfulness is the ability to be in the moment without needing to resist what's distressing, without needing to resist the pain, nor are we needing to fixate on the pain or magnify the pain or ruminate on the pain and hence increase it. It's the ability to be with it as is, right here and now. So from a physiological perspective, empathy for negative emotions engages the sympathetic system, the fight, flight, and freeze. That's a no-brainer. When we see somebody distressed, our empathy makes us feel distressed. And then compassion relies on the ventral vagal, a physiological state of safety and connectedness. Instead of being emotionally immersed in suffering, there's an activated awareness, mindfulness of, oh, we are experiencing suffering. And, it's a physiological state of safety and connectedness because, as we talked about, compassion takes in not just the suffering of the individual, but of how we are all connected in the human experience. That for me, that means today it's you, tomorrow it's me, the next day it's your father, 2 weeks later it's somebody else who has to go through the same thing. That brings a lot of connectedness and allows us to drop into, like literally drop into this, a sense of safety within our physical being. And the other thing that I notice with compassion, or in this case, self-compassion, is that when I drop into a physical sense of safety, I am more apt, I am more open, I am more capable, I'm more empowered to ask for help and receive help. And I'm actually more likely to push away help, to deny help, to resist help when I am just not being open, when I am in a state of just pure distress without self-compassion. And I think that's also really interesting to see, where, compassion actually not only gives us a sense of inner peace inside, that inner security inside, but because of that inner security, sorry, I meant self-compassion, because of that inner security, we're more we're more capable, we're more able to ask for help and receive help from that state, versus when we are not able to drop into the body and feel safe in the body. That's when we resist help. So that's another one of my experiences. And it actually, it makes sense because we go into the freeze mode, resisting help mode, when we don't feel safe. We're not opening up ourselves to receive, but we're getting ready to hide or run. So that's why self-compassion is an important practice. It's not to shun suffering. It is not to push away the experiences of suffering, the distress, experiences of distress, is so that we're able to feel a sense of connectedness and safety enough to be able to open up to assistance, open up to help, and to receive help. All right. So here's another example that distinguishes between, that allows us to see the difference between empathy and self-compassion. Let's imagine that you're on a flight with a crying baby right next to you. Have you been through this situation? I mean, I'm grateful to be able to say that I've never had a baby next to me, because, they're typically up in the front in the cots. But I've had situations where there was a crying baby on board that's disturbing the entire cabin. So if we simply be with it in empathy, we just don't practice self-compassion at all, then what happens with the empathy response, which is automatic, right, with autonomic resonance, we're able to sense the distress with the situation, with the child. And if we stay in that empathetic state, assuming that the baby stays crying throughout the flight, our physiology and emotions can mirror the stress state. And most likely it's going to start to mirror distress. An effect is that we respond to the situation in fight, flight, freeze, which leads us to empathy fatigue. Right? That's very self-explanatory and just very logical. But if we're applying self-compassion, going through mindfulness, common humanity, kindness, going through the steps, just apply that initial pressure, skates on ice, apply that initial force to be able to move forward. Mindfulness, recognizing your own triggered emotions in face of the environmental stress. So baby in need, anxiety, embarrassment, recognize that, oh, this is actually the situation that I'm in. I'm stuck on an airplane with a crying, screaming baby, and the baby is in need. And there's a lot of anxiety in the air. And maybe you're also feeling the embarrassment of the mother through autonomic resonance. So recognize that that is the situation, and we're being with the situation. We're not resisting it. We're in the situation, and we're not blowing up in disproportionate terms. We're in the situation. Baby's loud. I'm tired, and I'm also getting cranky. And then we apply common humanity, and we can say anyone who feels stress in the situation, I'm not alone. I got a whole cabin of people being in the same situation as me, needing to listen to the screaming baby. There's no way I'm alone. Everyone's in this together until we land. And then kindness, loving kindness, is totally normal to feel distressed. Sending myself love, my child, or sending myself love. In this case, it's not my child, but sending myself love and the child and others. I got this. So I've actually done this exercise in this situation before, actual flight with crying baby, and consciously doing self-compassion work. And it actually worked. So instead of, the hand on heart and tapping, because I felt like it was a little too embarrassing to actually do it outright. So what I ended up doing, instead of the gesture, the soothing gesture in the heart, I just did taps on my leg. And I actually got this from a source where they said this is what they teach in the military. In sort of the frontline situations where they really needed tools to self-soothe. Of course, they're not going to do the lovey-dovey things, hugging or cradling the face, but they were taught to just tap on their legs, when they're distressed, to just tap on the legs. And that's what I did. It's discreet. No one's going to know you're doing it underneath your blanket or your jacket. Just tap on the legs and start being kind to yourself. It's totally normal that I'm feeling distress, that this is turning out to be a very distracting flight. I can't even concentrate on watching a movie, blah, blah, blah. Tap on leg. I did a little bit of rocking, just tiny bit. And then what ended up happening to me emotionally is that I felt so connected. I felt connected, and not in a sense that I felt connected to the baby or to anyone, but but I felt connected as being able to stay in neutrality and equanimity enough to feel a sense of calm and still be connected to all of my intellectual faculties and even the sort of higher frequency emotions of open-heartedness. To me, it's sort of an open-heartedness to be able to stay open without shielding myself. And I think the way that I worded the slide in terms of, in response in a state of calm and connectedness, giving better support to my child. So if we flip the roles, as in if you are actually if you're actually the caretaker, mom or dad, or just any caretaker taking care of a screaming baby, the same thing, you do the same thing with self-compassion, going through mindfulness, recognizing the trigger emotions. Baby is crying and I'm freaked out inside. I'm feeling so embarrassed. Common humanity, anybody would feel stressed, embarrassed in this situation, and kindness. Of course, it's normal to feel distress. I don't have to be embarrassed. Sending myself, in this case, my child, love and others love, I got this. It's okay. It's totally normal for the child to cry. It's okay. And then what I project as what the caretaker can end up with is staying connected. And when we stay connected, as I said, when we stay connected, we are more open and we're more able to recognize help. We would be more open to assistance instead of, sort of unconsciously pushing help away. We would be open to help. So mindfully recognize your own distress and allow it to be there. That brings calm and connectedness. And our calm and connected state then positively influences the mind state of others through autonomic mimicry. Isn't that interesting? It actually, our own stability comes back to influence other people's stability. Then instead of this being some sort of selfish thing, like, oh, it's just for me, I deserve to have self-compassion, it's for me. No, it's our own state of calm contributes to other people's state of calm. So it's a win-win situation. All right. So I thought this graph that I found was also very, very helpful in distinguishing between empathy and compassion. So it actually, the scales of engagement starts out with pity, whereas I'm acknowledging somebody else's suffering, but I'm not doing anything with it. And then we move on to sympathy, where I care about someone's suffering. And then empathy is I'm able to feel and mirror your suffering and be able to put myself in your shoes. And then with compassion, there's that increase in the level of engagement into I want to relieve your suffering. And of course, this is from Psychology Today. We can cultivate compassion and self-compassion through loving kindness meditation. And Kristen Neff offers a lot of meditations on her website, so go ahead and check it out. She's got exercises on there, and she has courses on there and reading materials that could be very helpful. And so let's move into loving kindness metta meditation, because meditation really helps us be connected, come back to the present moment, come back to simply what is happening in the moment, accept the moment, allow things to be, again, without minimizing or maximizing or increasing suffering, pain, emotions. It's just being in this moment. And I love this meditation because it's active. It's not sort of your traditional meditation where you sit there, you watch the thoughts, where you concentrate on the breathing. It's something that's active, and it trains self-compassion. So the way to do it is first visualize your own suffering and send love to it. Then extend that warmth to a close friend, a person in pain, or a neutral person, and finally the community at large. So with all the metta meditations that I've seen and I've done, and sort of the videos of teachers on metta meditation, almost all of them start with the self. You always want to start with self-compassion and then radiate out in terms of how intimate you are with them. So 2 takeaways. First, compassion is active. You send love to the other person instead of passively experiencing their pain alongside them. And second, it supports the person in need. When you come from a loving place, you create a safe environment for them. You give them a judgment-free space to experience their thoughts and emotions. So going back to the baby on slide, if you remember, when we're able to bring ourselves to a calm state, other people also get the benefit of it just through, biomimicry. Okay. So this is one of the last slides. Just wanted us to experience the short form of metta meditation or loving kindness meditation to close out our presentation today. It's around 10 minutes and led by Sharon Salzberg, a very well-known meditation teacher. I think she used to teach with Spirit Rock as well. I don't remember actually exactly where she teaches now. I think she has relocated to the East Coast. I am not sure, don't quote me on it, but I found this short video to be a lifesaver for myself. And I come back to this particular video over and over again when I feel like I just need that guidance to enter into the meditation practice. And Sharon just does it in such a heartful, straightforward way. It gets to it right away, and you're able to experience the effectiveness almost right away, at least for me. So again, if you like to watch on YouTube, feel free to just search for 10-minute loving kindness meditation with Sharon Salzberg, or we'll just watch it right now. And with she's going to go through sending love or sending goodwill to me, to you, to all beings in the order that I listed on here, so that if you feel kind of lost, as there was a period where we do this on our own, you can come back and refer to it. So here we go. Again, I know I've been presenting a little more on a faster side because it's been a long presentation, but let's just take this moment for myself as well to just let the stress out. Let the nerves out. Stretch out the stiff muscles. There's nothing serious going on here. We're just practicing loving kindness meditation. Just start to get in a space of calm and peace and love. And that's for ourselves, love for ourselves and each other. We're all together in this. All right, and let's begin.
You can sit comfortably, close your eyes or not. In this method of meditation, rather than centering our attention on the feeling of the breath, we center our attention on the silent repetition of certain phrases. The phrases are like an offering. They're the expression of the heart. Being words, they will tend to be imperfect, but that's okay. The first recipient of loving kindness is ourselves. So if you can think of 3 or 4 phrases that could convey that kind of well-wishing to yourself. Common phrases are things like, may I be safe, be happy, be healthy, live with ease. May I be safe, be happy, be healthy, live with ease. This last phrase, may I live with ease, means the things of day-to-day life like livelihood and family, may it not be such a struggle. May I live with ease. You can use these phrases or other phrases that make sense to you and simply repeat them over and over again with enough space and enough silence so that it's a rhythm that's pleasing to you. This is like the song of the heart. May I be safe, be happy, be healthy, live with ease. And here the skill set is just the same. You may find your attention wandering, you go to the past, you go to the future. It's okay. You realize you've been distracted, you've gone away. Gently let go and come back. See if you can call to mind a friend. We'll start with a friend who's doing pretty well right now. They may not be perfectly happy, but at least in some arena of life, they're enjoying success or good fortune. So if someone like that comes to mind, bring them here. You can get an image of them, say their name to yourself, get a feeling for their presence, and offer the phrases of loving kindness to them. Just the same phrases you've offered to yourself. May you be safe, be happy, be healthy, live with ease, or whatever phrases they might be. And then a friend who's having a difficult time right now, bring them here. See what happens as you offer the phrases of loving kindness to them. And then all beings everywhere, all people, all creatures, all those in existence, near and far, known and unknown. May all beings be safe, be happy, be healthy, live with ease. And when you feel ready, you can open your eyes. See if you can bring some of this energy and sense of connection into your day.
All right, so start to come back. And that's the loving kindness and metta meditation. And of course, may all of you be safe. May all of you be happy. May all of you be healthy. And may all of you live with ease. I know personally, as I was calming down, really getting into the meditation, I just got this image and projection of so many people who's been in situations of distress, of suffering very intensely throughout the last couple of years. A lot of it, of course, pandemic induced, provoked. A lot of it, of course, is just going ons with the day to day and experiencing change as we transition out of the pandemic and into sort of this new world, new way of doing things that is completely, completely new. And of course, sometimes our threat response would be triggered in needing to let go of the old and moving on to the new. And just like my 3 o'clock awakenings, not spiritual awakening, but 3 o'clock sleeplessness, it's not something that I could control. It just comes very suddenly. And it just indicates to me that there's some sort of, emotional needs that are perhaps unmet, that I need to look at it, and then that it's time to really tune within and practice self-compassion, especially within these turbulent times. And of course, if we look at it historically, it is more often than not that we are always in turbulence, under some sort of turbulence and under transition, but such is life, isn't it? So, of course, wishing you all safe and happy and healthy. And of course, hoping that this meditation helps. And of course, feel free to Google it online and use it as a resource. Sorry about that. So talking about resources, again, they're guided meditations and mindful self-compassion training. It's actually training on Kristen Neff's website. Feel free to go there, take a look. And she has a self-compassion test on there too. I've not taken it before, but feel free to use it. I think it's still there. And again, because I attended the retreat with Kristen Neff with Spirit Rock, feel free to go there and see if there are any programs that interest you. They teach Vipassana meditation. So they are a Buddhist foundation. They're a Buddhist retreat center, Spirit Rock, and they offer Buddhist teachings, Vipassana or mindfulness trainings and teachings. And, you know, we're post-pandemic, so a lot of them are online. You can stream, and just wherever you are, you can learn about mindfulness. You can learn more about self-compassion. You can even learn more about neurobiology through programs offered at Spirit Rock. And Sounds True, another resource that I found so helpful in my own inner journey. They have programs, blogs, and podcasts for you to utilize and purchase if you like. And lastly, Kristen Neff's books. So the first one, I would say the classic one, the most popular one is Self-Compassion, where I think a lot of the materials you'll find in this presentation already, but take a look. Get it from your local library. It's popular enough that more than likely it's going to be at your local library. And her newest book, which I think came out earlier this year, is called Fierce Self-Compassion. And it focuses more on women and sort of harnessing that sense of power, that sense of ability to go into action, to experience a different side to self-compassion, because I think a lot of times women tend to focus on the tender self-compassion, and then we forget sometimes that self-compassion is fierce. Self-compassion is drawing that line and saying no. It's more about no is that complete sentence. So for those who are interested, man and woman, or however you identify gender-wise, feel free to check that out as well. So that is pretty much the end. So I really hope that was helpful. Again, this was done as more of an in-person small group presentation, but I just find that there's something about it where I just want to share and hope people really gain benefits from it. I just feel like there's so many people who's going through the same thing as me. Like, this is me connecting to the common humanity. Like, there's no way that I'm the only one waking up at 3 in the morning and wondering what is the purpose of all of it, right? Those existential moments, the 0 hour where I'm asking myself, what is the purpose of me being here? Like, I don't have those harmful ideations, but it's more of I get pulled into the rabbit hole of questioning the meaning of my existence. It's very I can get very existentialist in those hours. So applying common humanity, I just feel like I cannot be the only one going through this. And if this material, Dr. Kristen Neff's material, has helped me so much, I'm sure a lot of people can benefit from this as well. Of course, I'm only sharing a part of the information that was a part of Kristen Neff's retreat through Spirit Rock. Again, she offers extensive programs, and you can do more extensive readings through her books. I just hope that this relieves some of that distress for you, or this starts some sort of journey, some sort of understanding of self-compassion, where you would feel a little more prepared, having a couple more tools for you to utilize, in those, again, the shadows of the darkness. Oh, not the darkness of the night. Shoot, that phrase. Anyway, just going through darkness, going through personal shadows, those situations where I hope this at least brings you some sort of beacon to start to actually feel that you're not alone, and that self-compassion can be practiced. It is a practice. And it can become a habit. So hopefully, you're practicing along with me, and I thank you so, so much for your interest in self-compassion, because remember, biomimicry and autonomic mimicry, your piece is my piece. And your connectedness is also my connectedness. So with that, thank you so, so much. I'm just going to say namaste. The divinity within me bows, recognizes and bows to the divinity within you. And thank you so, so much for being you. And I'm sure I'll see you soon. Namaste. Thank you.